Ethan Calloway shoved the hospital room door open so hard it slammed against the wall. "Mom!" The bouquet of white lilies slipped from his hand and crashed onto the floor. For one horrifying second, his brain refused to understand what he was seeing. Vanessa stood beside Margaret's hospital bed, both hands pressing a pillow down. Margaret's arms trembled weakly beneath the blanket. Her fingers twitched. Her oxygen tube dangled uselessly against her shoulder. Vanessa turned so suddenly her expression cracked wide open. Not guilt, not panic, but anger. "Ethan, what the hell are you doing?" He crossed the room in seconds and shoved her backwards so hard she stumbled into the IV stand. Margaret gasped violently, coughing and grabbing for air. The sound nearly broke him. Mom, look at me. Breathe, okay? Breathe." Vanessa shook her head rapidly. "No, wait. This isn't what it looks like." Ethan stared at her like he had never seen her before. "What?" His voice came out dangerously quiet. "You had a pillow over my mother's face." "No," Vanessa cried. "She couldn't breathe. I was trying to help." "You think I'm stupid?" Nurses stormed into the room. "What's happening?" "She tried to kill my mother," Ethan shouted. Vanessa's face drained of color. "No, Ethan, please listen to me." Security came seconds later. Margaret reached weakly for Ethan's arm. "Don't let her near me." Those 5 words destroyed him because Margaret never sounded afraid. Not once in his 46 years had Ethan heard fear in his mother's voice. Not even when his father died. Not even when she worked double shifts to keep food on the table. But now, she looked terrified. And the woman Ethan was supposed to marry stood frozen in the corner. The woman he had trusted. The woman he had loved. The woman wearing the engagement ring he bought 6 months ago. The woman who had just tried to suffocate his mother. Vanessa burst into tears. "Oh, you're making a mistake." But Ethan couldn't hear anything anymore. Everything inside him had gone numb. 3 weeks earlier, Ethan Calloway had everything: money, power, respect, a skyline penthouse overlooking Charlotte, luxury cars, business magazines calling him one of the smartest investors in America. At 46, his company, Calloway Ventures, controlled hotels, commercial buildings, and luxury properties across 4 states. People envied him, but every night Ethan sat alone. His penthouse felt too quiet, too cold, too empty. Most nights he would pour himself a drink, stare out the massive windows, and wonder how success had somehow made him lonelier. He hated business dinners, hated fake laughter, hated women who suddenly found him interesting after Googling his net worth. Real connection felt impossible, except with one person. Margaret Calloway, his mother, the only person who treated him exactly the same before and after the money. Every Sunday at 6 sharp, Ethan drove to her house for dinner. No excuses, no canceled meetings, no rescheduling. Margaret didn't care if he was rich. If anything, she rolled her eyes at it. "You know what money can't buy?" she said one Sunday while stirring soup. "What?" "Peace." Ethan laughed. "That sounds suspiciously like something poor people say." Margaret pointed the spoon at him. "And that right there is why you're still single." He groaned. "Not this conversation again." "Yes, this conversation again," she said. "You're getting older." "I'm 46, Mom, not 90. You want to come home to an empty house forever?" He stayed quiet because that question always landed. Margaret softened. "You work too much, Ethan." "I had to." "No," she said gently. "You chose to." He looked away because maybe she was right. He had spent so many years building success that relationships became secondary, then forgotten, then non-existent. Margaret reached across the table. "You deserve someone good." "Good women don't exactly line up for emotionally unavailable billionaires." She smiled sadly. You'd be surprised. 2 weeks later, Ethan attended a charity gala he didn't even want to go to. He almost canceled. Actually, he tried, but his assistant practically forced him. "You donated $3 million, Marcus said. "You have to show up." "I hate these events." "Smile for an hour and leave." Ethan sighed. "Fine." That night changed everything, or so he thought. He noticed her near the bar, dark green dress, confident smile, elegant but not flashy. She wasn't trying too hard, and strangely, she ignored him. Everyone else wanted something, a deal, a favor, attention, but not her. Later, while reaching for sparkling water, they bumped shoulders. "Oh my God," she said quickly. "I'm so sorry." "It's okay." She laughed nervously. "I should probably stop embarrassing myself for the night." Something about her felt easy, natural. "I'm Ethan," he said. "Vanessa." No recognition. No weird billionaire reaction. No sudden flirting. Just conversation. Easy conversation. For 40 minutes they talked. Books, travel, family, loss, life. And when Ethan finally looked at his watch, he realized something shocking. He hadn't checked his phone once. "You're different," Vanessa said quietly. "Different good or different bad?" She smiled. "Different lonely." That caught him off guard. "What makes you think I'm lonely?" "Because I know what lonely looks like." Nobody had ever said something like that to him before. Not honestly. Not directly. When she left, Ethan surprised himself. "Can I see you again?" She hesitated, then smiled. "Yeah, I'd like that." And for the first time in years, Ethan looked forward to tomorrow. If you're already feeling where this story's going, hit that like button right now and subscribe to Storynova, because trust me, what Ethan discovers about Vanessa later will completely change everything. Over the next few months, something shifted. Ethan smiled more, laughed more, worked less. Vanessa became part of his life fast. Dinner dates turned into weekends away. Weekends turned into routines. And slowly the loneliness disappeared. Or at least, that's what Ethan believed. One evening at dinner, Vanessa reached across the table. "You know what scares me?" "What?" "That one day you'll wake up and realize I'm not enough." He frowned. "Where's that coming from?" She looked down. "You're successful, important, powerful." "Vanessa." "No, seriously," she said softly. "People like you don't stay." Ethan took her hand. "I'm not going anywhere." She smiled, but for a split second, something unreadable crossed her face. Gone so quickly, he almost missed it. And unfortunately for Ethan, that wouldn't be the last warning sign he ignored. At the next Sunday dinner, Margaret met Vanessa for the third time. And halfway through dessert, something changed. Something that made Margaret suddenly very, very uncomfortable. If you think Margaret should trust her instincts, comment, "Trust your gut," below. Because what she notices next nearly costs her life. Margaret set her fork down slowly and watched Vanessa laugh at something Ethan had said, but something about the laugh didn't sit right with her. It wasn't the sound itself. It was the timing. Too perfect, too practiced, like someone performing happiness instead of feeling it. She had spent 32 years as a nurse reading faces, hearing lies before patients even opened their mouths, noticing fear hiding behind smiles. And right now, sitting across from Ethan's fiancée, every instinct she had was whispering the same warning. Something isn't right. "You okay, Mom?" Ethan asked. Margaret forced a smile. "Just tired?" Vanessa immediately leaned forward. "You've been coughing more tonight. Are you taking your medication?" Margaret looked at her carefully. "I am?" "You really should take better care of yourself." Vanessa said sweetly. Ethan worries about you so much. Something about the sentence bothered Margaret. She couldn't explain why. Maybe it was how Vanessa said Ethan's name possessively. Maybe it was the look in her eyes. Warm voice, cold expression. Ethan smiled. See? I told you Vanessa cares. Margaret nodded politely, but inside, uneasiness tightened in her chest. Later that evening, while Ethan stepped outside to take a business call, Margaret walked into the kitchen carrying empty plates. Vanessa followed her. Let me help, she said quickly. You're a guest, Margaret replied. I insist. They stood quietly for a moment, Margaret washing dishes, Vanessa drying them. Then suddenly Vanessa asked, Can I ask you something? Sure. Do you think Ethan moves too slowly emotionally? Margaret frowned. What do you mean? Vanessa shrugged casually. I don't know. Sometimes it feels like he still puts work first. Or... She paused. Family. Margaret slowly turned off the faucet. Family should come first. Vanessa smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. Even after marriage? Margaret held her gaze. Especially after marriage. Something flickered across Vanessa's face. Irritation. Gone in an instant. I just want him to prioritize us eventually, Vanessa said softly. Margaret dried her hands. Love isn't competition, dear. Vanessa looked confused. Excuse me? When you truly love someone, you don't compete with the people who already love them. The room went quiet. Then Ethan walked back in, smiling. What did I miss? Vanessa immediately brightened. Your mom was just giving me relationship advice. Margaret forced another smile, but the knot in her stomach only grew. The following week, Ethan couldn't stop talking about Vanessa. At breakfast meetings, during calls. Even Marcus, his longtime assistant, noticed the difference. You're smiling too much, Marcus said. Ethan laughed. That a crime? Honestly, it's weird. Ethan shook his head. I think this might actually be it. Marcus leaned back. You serious? Yeah. You've known her less than a year. When you know, you know. Marcus hesitated. And your mom? Ethan sighed immediately. Don't start. I'm just asking. She's cautious, that's all. But Margaret wasn't just cautious. Over the next month, little things kept bothering her. Vanessa asking strangely detailed questions about Ethan's investments. Vanessa casually bringing up wills during dinner. Vanessa subtly criticizing Ethan any time Margaret needed help. He cancels too much for family emergencies, Vanessa said one night. I just worry people take advantage of how generous he is. Margaret looked directly at her. Family isn't taking advantage. Vanessa smiled quickly. Oh, I didn't mean you. But Margaret noticed something else too. Vanessa hated surprises, hated not knowing Ethan's plans. If he changed schedules suddenly, she became tense, irritable. Once Ethan canceled a dinner date because Margaret had a doctor's appointment. Vanessa barely hid her frustration. Again? She muttered. Ethan frowned. My mom needed me. Of course, Vanessa said quickly. Forget I said anything. But Ethan noticed the shift. Are you upset? Vanessa sighed dramatically. No, I just miss you. He pulled her closer. Come on. You know my mom's health hasn't been great? Vanessa leaned against him. I know, I'm trying. Ethan kissed her forehead, unaware of the expression that crossed her face when he looked away. Meanwhile, Margaret's cough worsened. At first she dismissed it. Then came exhaustion, fever, trouble breathing. Ethan panicked the morning she collapsed trying to get out of bed. Mom! He rushed her to St. Helena Medical Center himself. Pneumonia. Severe. The doctor looked serious. We want to keep her under observation. Ethan barely left the hospital, Calls piled up. Meetings got canceled. He sat beside Margaret's bed, holding her hand. "You scared me," he whispered. Margaret smiled weakly. "I'm too stubborn to go anywhere." Vanessa suddenly stepped up in ways that surprised everyone. She brought food, coffee, stayed late, talked kindly with nurses. "Go home and shower," she told Ethan one afternoon. "You look exhausted." "I don't want to leave her." "I'll stay," Vanessa said softly. "You trust me, don't you?" Ethan smiled tiredly. "Of course." Margaret quietly looked away. Because every time Ethan left the room, something changed. Vanessa stopped smiling. Her warmth disappeared. One afternoon, while adjusting Margaret's blanket, Vanessa leaned close enough that only Margaret could hear her. "You know," she whispered, "Ethan worries too much about you." Margaret stared at her. "What's that supposed to mean?" Vanessa smiled faintly. "Nothing." But something in her voice sent chills through Margaret. Later that evening, Margaret grabbed Ethan's wrist before he left. "Don't go." Ethan looked confused. "I'm just getting dinner downstairs." She hesitated. Her voice dropped to almost a whisper. "Please don't leave me alone with Vanessa." Ethan blinked. "Mom!" "I'm serious. You're sick," he said gently. "You're exhausted." "Ethan?" Her eyes filled with fear. Something about her isn't right. Ethan exhaled heavily. "We've had this conversation. Please listen to me. You never gave her a chance." Margaret's face fell. "You think I'd lie about something like this?" Ethan rubbed his forehead. "I think you're overwhelmed." Vanessa suddenly walked in carrying coffee. "Everything okay?" Ethan forced a smile. "Yeah." Margaret looked at her silently. Vanessa smiled sweetly. Too sweetly. And for the first time in his life, Ethan chose not to believe his mother. If you're still watching, hit that like button and subscribe to Storynova, because trust me, what Ethan discovers about Vanessa's past is far darker than anyone expected. And after this next moment, ignoring Margaret's warning becomes the biggest mistake of his life. Ethan barely slept during the next few days. Between hospital visits, investor calls, and trying to keep Calloway Ventures from spiraling without him, exhaustion settled deep into his bones. Still, every morning started the same way. Coffee in one hand, hospital elevator in front of him, guilt sitting heavy in his chest. Seeing Margaret hooked to machines made something inside him ache in a way success never could fix. "You need to stop looking at me like I'm dying," Margaret muttered one morning as Ethan adjusted her blanket. "You scared me," he admitted quietly. "Well, I'm still here." She coughed, then looked toward the door. "Did Vanessa come?" Ethan nodded. "She'll be here after lunch." Margaret went quiet immediately. Ethan noticed it. "Mom." She looked away. "I'm tired." But he knew that wasn't true. Something had shifted. Margaret wasn't just uncomfortable around Vanessa anymore. She was afraid, and Ethan hated that feeling because it forced him to ask questions he didn't want answers to. Later that afternoon, Vanessa arrived carrying fresh flowers and a warm smile. "How's my favorite patient?" she asked sweetly. Margaret forced a thin smile. "Still breathing." Vanessa laughed softly like it was charming. Ethan stood and stretched. "I need to take this conference call downstairs." Vanessa touched his arm gently. "Go, I've got her." Margaret immediately looked at Ethan. "You don't have to leave." Ethan hesitated. "Mom, it's 15 minutes. Her expression tightened. "Okay." But there was something strange in her voice. Fear wrapped in resignation. Ethan kissed her forehead. "I'll be back." The second he walked out, silence filled the room. Vanessa sat in the chair beside the bed and crossed her legs slowly. Her smile disappeared. Margaret watched her carefully. "Why do you do that?" Vanessa tilted her head. Do what? Pretend. Vanessa chuckled softly. You always were observant. Margaret's stomach dropped. You don't love him. Vanessa smiled again, but this time it looked colder. You know what your problem is? What? You think people are good. Margaret frowned. And you think they're not? Vanessa leaned forward slightly. I think people do what they have to do. Margaret's voice hardened. Ethan deserves better than someone pretending to care about him. Vanessa's jaw tightened. You really don't know when to stop talking. You can fool him, Margaret said quietly, but not me. For a second, something dangerous flashed across Vanessa's face. Then the smile returned. Good thing he doesn't listen to you anymore. Margaret's chest tightened. Before she could respond, Vanessa stood. I should let you rest. She walked out, smiling at nurses like nothing had happened. But Margaret couldn't shake the feeling that something terrible was coming. Meanwhile, downstairs, Ethan wrapped up his conference call when Marcus suddenly appeared holding a folder. We need to talk. Ethan frowned. Now. Yeah, privately. Something in Marcus's tone immediately made Ethan uneasy. 20 minutes later, they sat in Ethan's office, overlooking downtown Charlotte. Marcus slid the folder across the desk. Before I say anything, I need you to promise not to get mad. Ethan sighed. That's never a good opening sentence. Marcus hesitated. I looked into Vanessa. Ethan's expression darkened instantly. Excuse me? I wasn't trying to cross a line. Then what exactly were you doing? Marcus leaned forward. Protecting you. Ethan shook his head. Unbelievable. Just look at it first. Reluctantly, Ethan opened the folder. Bankruptcy records, debt notices, lawsuits, failed business filings, credit card balances, numbers circled in red ink. Over $200,000 in debt. Ethan stared at the paperwork. This can't be right. It is. She said her business closed because of market issues. Marcus exhaled. It collapsed 6 months before she met you. Ethan looked up slowly. So? Marcus hesitated. So according to everything I found, she started showing up at charity events you regularly attend right after. Ethan's face hardened. What are you implying? Marcus met his eyes carefully. That meeting you might not have been an accident. Silence. Heavy silence. Ethan stood immediately. No. Ethan. No. His voice sharpened. You don't know her. Do you? Marcus asked quietly. Ethan looked away because suddenly he wasn't sure. That night at dinner, Ethan sat across from Vanessa trying to act normal, but his mind wouldn't stop racing. He watched her laugh, smile, reach for his hand. Everything suddenly felt rehearsed. You okay? Vanessa asked softly. Long day. She squeezed his fingers. Hospital? Yeah. She sighed dramatically. I hate seeing your mom like this. Ethan hesitated. Do you? Vanessa blinked. What does that mean? He looked at her carefully. How bad were things after your business failed? Her expression froze for a split second. Barely noticeable, but Ethan caught it. Why are you asking? Just curious. Vanessa forced a laugh. Pretty bad. Debt? Another pause. Some. How much? Her smile disappeared. Where's this coming from? Ethan leaned back. I'm asking. Vanessa crossed her arms. Do you not trust me? He didn't answer immediately, and that silence changed everything. Vanessa looked hurt, genuinely hurt, or maybe performed hurt. Ethan suddenly couldn't tell anymore. Who's been talking to you? She asked quietly. No one. Ethan. Her eyes narrowed. Was it your mother? Leave my mother out of this. Vanessa's voice sharpened. Interesting. Ethan frowned. What's that supposed to mean? Vanessa stood suddenly. Nothing. Forget it. She grabbed her purse. I think you should figure out who you trust before accusing me of things. Then she walked away. But right before she reached the door, Ethan heard her whisper something under her breath, so quietly he almost missed it. She ruins everything. Ethan froze. What did you say? Vanessa turned instantly, smiling again. Nothing, baby. But upstairs in her hospital room, Margaret suddenly woke up gasping from sleep, her chest tightening with panic she couldn't explain. And for reasons she didn't fully understand, she became absolutely certain she was in danger. If you've ever ignored a red flag and regretted it later, comment, I learned the hard way, below. Because Ethan is about to discover that the biggest lies are usually hiding in plain sight. And what Vanessa does next changes everything. Margaret couldn't sleep after that night. Every sound in the hospital room made her flinch awake. The beeping monitors, nurses changing shifts, the distant sound of carts rolling down hallways. But worse than the noise was the feeling sitting in her chest, a heavy certainty that something terrible was getting closer. Around 6 in the morning, Ethan walked into the room carrying coffee and a bag of muffins. Morning, he said gently. Margaret looked relieved to see him. You stayed away too long. He smiled tiredly. 4 hours isn't too long. Felt long. Ethan sat beside her bed. How are you feeling? Margaret hesitated. Honestly? Always. Scared. Ethan frowned immediately. Why? She looked down at her blanket. Because I think something bad is happening. He exhaled slowly. Mom. No, she said quickly. Please don't dismiss me this time. Ethan rubbed his face. He wanted to believe she was just exhausted, overwhelmed, sick. But Marcus's folder hadn't left his mind. Neither had Vanessa's reaction over dinner, or the way she whispered, she ruins everything. Tell me exactly what's bothering you, he said finally. Margaret looked relieved. When you leave the room, Vanessa changes. Ethan stayed quiet. She says things. Like what? Margaret swallowed. Things that sound threatening. Ethan frowned harder. Threatening how? Margaret hesitated, almost embarrassed. I know how it sounds. Mom, she talks like I'm in the way. Ethan leaned back slowly. Did she actually threaten you? Not directly. Then what? Margaret looked him dead in the eyes. A nurse spends her whole life learning instincts, Ethan. Mine are screaming at me. Silence settled between them. Ethan wanted facts, evidence, something solid. But all Margaret had was fear. And somehow, that almost bothered him more. Before he could respond, Vanessa walked in carrying flowers and coffee. Perfect timing, she said brightly. Then she noticed the serious expressions. Everything okay? Margaret immediately stiffened. Ethan noticed. Vanessa noticed too. Did I interrupt something? Ethan stood. Actually, I wanted to ask you something. Vanessa blinked. Okay. Can we talk outside? For the first time in weeks, Vanessa looked uneasy. Out in the hallway, Ethan folded his arms. My mother says you've been making her uncomfortable. Vanessa stared at him in disbelief. Seriously? Just answer the question. Her face dropped. Wow. Ethan frowned. What? Vanessa laughed bitterly. Nothing. I just didn't think we were here already. Here where? The part where your mother turns you against me. Ethan's jaw tightened. Don't do that. Do what? Avoid the question. Vanessa shook her head slowly. You know what? Fine. Yes, your mom and I don't exactly click. Why? Vanessa hesitated. Because she hates me. Ethan frowned. She doesn't hate you. Vanessa let out a humorless laugh. Really? Because every time I walk into a room, she looks at me like I'm poison. Ethan stayed quiet. Vanessa stepped closer. I love you, Ethan. Her eyes softened. Do you really think I'd hurt your mother? The question landed harder than he expected, because despite everything, he still wanted to believe her. No, he admitted quietly. Vanessa exhaled in relief and touched his face gently. Then trust me. For a moment, Ethan almost did, but then Marcus's folder flashed through his mind again. Why didn't you tell me about the debt? Vanessa's hand immediately dropped. Who told you? So it's true. She looked away. I didn't want you judging me. $200,000? I was embarrassed, she snapped. Ethan lowered his voice. Did you know who I was before we met? Silence. Tiny silence. But enough. Vanessa. Of course I knew who you were, she admitted quickly. Everyone in Charlotte knows who you are. That's not what I asked. Her expression hardened slightly. What exactly are you accusing me of? Ethan sighed heavily. I don't know. Wow. She stepped back. You really don't trust me. I'm trying. No, she said quietly. You're listening to other people. Ethan ran a hand through his hair. I just need honesty. Vanessa suddenly looked emotional. Tears gathered in her eyes. You think I planned us? Ethan said nothing. Vanessa shook her head slowly. That hurts. She wiped her eyes. I thought we were building something real. Ethan hated this feeling. Doubt pulling him in two directions. His mother afraid upstairs. Vanessa crying in front of him. Nothing made sense anymore. I need space, he said quietly. Vanessa stared at him for a second too long, then nodded. Okay. But something in her expression changed again. Cold, brief, gone too quickly to explain. Take all the space you need, she said softly. Just remember who was actually here for you. Then she walked away. Ethan stood frozen in the hallway, feeling worse instead of better. Upstairs, Margaret watched the door anxiously. Where is he? She whispered. An hour later, Ethan got pulled into an emergency meeting downtown involving one of his hotel acquisitions. I'll only be gone 2 hours, he told Margaret. Marcus will stay nearby. Margaret grabbed his wrist instantly. No. Ethan looked surprised. Mom, please. Her voice trembled. Don't leave me. You'll be fine. No, Ethan. Tears suddenly filled her eyes. Something feels wrong. He softened immediately. Mom, security's downstairs. Nurses are here. You're safe. Margaret shook her head desperately. Please believe me. Ethan kissed her forehead. I'll be back before dinner. She looked heartbroken as he walked out. 20 minutes later, Vanessa stepped off the elevator carrying flowers. Her smile was calm, controlled. The receptionist smiled at her. Back again? Wouldn't miss checking on family, Vanessa said sweetly. Upstairs, Margaret saw her walking into the room and immediately felt her stomach drop. Vanessa quietly closed the door behind her. Slowly, carefully. Then she turned toward the bed, smiling. But this time, there was no warmth left in her eyes. Looks like it's just us, she said softly. Margaret's pulse quickened. Why are you here? Vanessa set the flowers down. To talk. Margaret swallowed hard. About what? Vanessa stepped closer to the bed. About how exhausting you're becoming. If you've made it this far, hit that like button and subscribe to Storynova because trust me, what Vanessa says next will reveal just how dangerous she really is. And Ethan has no idea how close his mother is to disaster. Margaret's fingers tightened around the edge of her blanket. What did you just say? She asked quietly, her voice thin but steady. Vanessa didn't answer immediately. She walked around the room slowly, as if she owned it now. as if she had been here 1,000 times instead of a handful. "You know what I find interesting?" Vanessa said at last. Margaret kept her eyes on her. "I'm not in the mood for games." Vanessa smiled faintly. "It's not a game. It's observation." She stopped beside the window, looking out at the hospital grounds. "Ethan thinks he's in control of everything, his business, his life, even people." She turned slightly. "But he's not." Margaret's stomach tightened. "What are you talking about?" Vanessa sighed like she was tired of explaining something obvious. "You." Margaret blinked slowly. "Me?" "Yes," Vanessa said softly. "You don't realize what you're doing." Margaret pushed herself slightly higher in bed. "I'm his mother." "Exactly." The word landed like a blade. Vanessa stepped closer again. "That's the problem." Margaret stared at her, disbelief slowly turning into anger. "You're in my son's life. Of course I care about him." Vanessa tilted her head. "Care?" She almost laughed. "That's not what this is." Margaret's voice sharpened. "Get to the point." Vanessa leaned in slightly. "You make him hesitate." The room went still. Margaret frowned. "Hesitate about what?" Vanessa's eyes darkened. "About us." A beat of silence passed. Then Margaret understood. "You think I'm in your way?" Vanessa didn't deny it. That was answer enough. Margaret shook her head slowly. "So, this is what it is." Vanessa crossed her arms. "What exactly?" "Jealousy." Vanessa's expression hardened instantly. "Don't flatter yourself." Margaret let out a quiet, bitter laugh. "Then what?" "Because from where I'm sitting, you're trying very hard to erase me." Vanessa's voice dropped lower. "I'm trying to build a life with him." "And I'm his mother," Margaret replied firmly. "That doesn't disappear because you show up." Vanessa stared at her for a long moment. Then she smiled again. But it was sharper now, thinner. "You really don't understand, do you?" Margaret's heart began to race. "Understand what?" Vanessa took a slow breath. "He listens to you." Margaret didn't respond. "Everything I say," Vanessa continued softly, "every decision, every plan, it all goes through your shadow." Margaret's voice cracked slightly with anger. "That's not true." Vanessa nodded slowly. "It is." She stepped closer to the bed. "And I can't compete with that." Margaret's eyes narrowed. "So you think the answer is getting rid of me?" Vanessa paused. Just for a second. Long enough for the silence to feel heavy. And then she smiled again. "You're putting words in my mouth?" But her eyes didn't match her tone. Margaret felt it then. Not confusion anymore, not suspicion. Certainty. "You're dangerous," Margaret said quietly. Vanessa's smile vanished. "Excuse me?" Margaret didn't look away. "I said you're dangerous." The air in the room shifted instantly. Vanessa straightened. "That's a very serious accusation." "Is it wrong?" Margaret asked. Vanessa stared at her, expression unreadable. Then she slowly walked back toward the chair and sat down. Calm again, controlled again. "Let me explain something to you," she said softly. "I didn't come here to fight you." Margaret watched her carefully. "It doesn't feel like that." Vanessa nodded slightly. "I came here to build something with Ethan." Her voice softened. "A future." Margaret replied immediately. "Then build it with him, not against me." That made Vanessa pause. For the first time, something cracked in her composure. Just a flicker. Then it was gone. "You think I'm the problem?" Vanessa said quietly. "I think you're making yourself one," Margaret replied. The words hit harder than expected. Vanessa stood up again, slower this time. "You know what I think," she said. Margaret stayed silent. "I think you're afraid of being replaced." Margaret's face tightened. I've never been replaced in my life. Vanessa stepped closer again. Everyone gets replaced eventually. The words hung in the air, cold, sharp, and deliberate. Before Margaret could respond, Vanessa added softly, "Even mothers." That was the moment Margaret realized this wasn't insecurity, this wasn't jealousy, this was something far more controlled, far more intentional. "Get out," Margaret said firmly. Vanessa didn't move immediately. Instead, she studied her for a long moment, as if memorizing her. Then she smiled faintly. "You should rest," she said softly. "You need your strength." Margaret's voice shook slightly. "Get out of my room." Vanessa turned toward the door, but paused with her hand on the handle. Without looking back, she said, "Ethan is going to choose eventually." Margaret's breath caught. Vanessa finally looked over her shoulder. "Make sure you're ready for what that means." Then she left. The door clicked shut, and Margaret sat there in silence, her chest tightening as her instincts screamed louder than ever before. Downstairs, Ethan finished his meeting earlier than expected. Something about it didn't sit right with him. Numbers felt off. Details didn't align. He excused himself abruptly and headed back to the hospital. Halfway through the elevator ride, his phone rang. Marcus. "Ethan, where are you?" "On my way up." "Why?" Marcus hesitated. "Vanessa's there." Ethan frowned instantly. "What?" "She went upstairs about 20 minutes ago." Ethan's grip tightened on the phone. "She said she was going to get coffee." Marcus lowered his voice. "She didn't." The elevator dinged. Ethan stepped out fast. Something in his chest tightened immediately as he saw nurses moving quickly near Margaret's room. "What's going on?" he asked sharply. A nurse looked up. "Your mother was upset. She's okay now, but—" Ethan didn't wait for the rest. He pushed into the room. Margaret was sitting upright, breathing heavily, eyes fixed on the door. "Mom?" he said quickly. She looked at him, and for a moment she looked relieved, then terrified again. "She was here," Margaret whispered. Ethan froze. "Who?" Margaret's voice broke slightly. "Vanessa." Silence. Ethan felt the air leave the room. "What did she say?" Margaret hesitated, then quietly. "She told me I was in her way." Ethan's face went completely still, and for the first time since he met Vanessa Reed, he felt something inside him shift, not doubt anymore, not confusion, something colder, something heavier, suspicion, and far too late, he realized he might have brought the wrong person into his life. If you're still watching, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to Storynova, because in the next part, Ethan is about to do something that will either expose the truth or destroy everything he loves trying. Ethan stood in the hospital room for a long moment without speaking. The only sound was Margaret's uneven breathing and the distant beeping of monitors down the hallway. "She said that to you?" he asked finally, his voice low and controlled. Margaret nodded slowly. Word for word. Ethan's jaw tightened. He looked toward the door as if Vanessa might walk back in at any second. "What else did she say?" Margaret hesitated. "That you would eventually choose." Ethan let out a short breath through his nose. "Choose between what?" Margaret's eyes filled slightly. "Between her and me." That landed harder than he expected. He turned away for a second, running a hand over his face. "Mom, she wouldn't say that." Margaret's voice sharpened despite her weakness. "She did." Silence followed, a heavy one. Ethan didn't want to believe it. He needed something concrete, something he could hold on to that made sense. But all he had was his mother's fear, and Vanessa's increasingly strange behavior. "I need to talk to her," he said finally. Margaret grabbed his wrist. "No." Ethan looked at her. "Mom, please," she said urgently. "Don't confront her alone." He paused. "Why?" Margaret swallowed hard. "Because I think she wants you isolated." That word stuck. Isolated. Ethan slowly pulled his hand free. "That's not fair. I'm telling you what I feel." Ethan exhaled sharply. "And I'm telling you I can't just accept this without speaking to her." Before Margaret could respond, the door opened. Vanessa walked in carrying a coffee cup, smiling like nothing had happened. "Hey," she said softly. Then she noticed Ethan's expression. "What's wrong?" Ethan stared at her. "Where were you?" Vanessa blinked. "Coffee?" Ethan's voice dropped. 20 minutes away from a hospital that has a cafe downstairs?" Vanessa hesitated for half a second. The line was long. Margaret watched silently. Ethan didn't move. "My mom says you were here." Vanessa's smile faded slightly. "Oh." That small word changed the air instantly. Ethan stepped forward. "So you were here?" Vanessa looked between them. "Ethan, I just came to check on her." "Don't," he cut in. His tone wasn't loud. That made it worse. "Don't lie to me right now." Vanessa's expression hardened slightly. "You're taking her word over mine?" Margaret spoke quietly from the bed. "I don't lie." Vanessa turned toward her. "Neither do I." Ethan raised a hand. "Stop." Both women went silent. Ethan looked exhausted, torn. "I need truth," he said slowly. "Not emotions, not interpretations. Truth." Vanessa stepped closer. "Then ask me anything." Ethan studied her face carefully. "Were you in this room alone with my mother?" Vanessa didn't answer immediately. That pause was enough. "Yes," she said finally. "I was." Margaret's grip tightened on the blanket. Ethan closed his eyes briefly. "Why didn't you tell me?" Vanessa sighed. "Because I didn't think it mattered." "You told her I was going to choose between you?" Vanessa's eyes flickered. "She misunderstood." Margaret's voice cut in. "I did not." Vanessa turned slightly. "You're twisting things." Ethan looked at Vanessa sharply. "Enough." Vanessa stepped back slightly. "Ethan, I said enough." The room fell into silence again. Ethan felt something cracking inside him. Not fully broken yet, but close. He looked between them. His mother, pale but steady. Vanessa, controlled but defensive. And for the first time, he couldn't tell which version of reality was real. "I'm going to step out," he said finally. Vanessa reached for his arm. "Don't do this." He gently pulled away. "I need air." He walked out before either of them could respond. In the hallway, Ethan leaned against the wall and exhaled slowly. His phone buzzed again. "Marcus." He answered immediately. "Talk to me." Marcus lowered his voice. "I checked something else." Ethan closed his eyes. "What now?" "Vanessa didn't just have debt," Marcus said. "She was involved in multiple failed partnerships. One of them ended in a fraud investigation." Ethan's eyes snapped open. "Fraud?" "Nothing proven," Marcus said quickly. "But there are patterns. She moves from situation to situation fast, reinvents herself." Ethan's grip tightened on the phone. "Why didn't you tell me earlier?" "Because I didn't have enough." A pause. "Now I do." Ethan looked through the glass window into Margaret's room. Vanessa was sitting beside her bed again, smiling softly, touching her hand like nothing was wrong. But Margaret wasn't smiling back. "Send me everything," Ethan said quietly. "Already did." Ethan hung up. Slowly, carefully, he pushed open the door again. Both women turned to him. He walked in slowly. "I want both of you to tell me the truth," he said. Vanessa sat up straighter. "I already have." Margaret said nothing. Ethan looked at Vanessa. "No more half answers." Then he looked at Margaret. "No more fear." Silence. Vanessa spoke first. Ethan, this is getting out of control. Margaret replied immediately. It already is. Ethan raised a hand. Stop. Both stopped again. He looked at Vanessa directly. Did you or did you not tell my mother I would choose between you? Vanessa hesitated. Then, I told her that you will eventually have to prioritize your life. Margaret shook her head. That's not what you said. Vanessa turned sharply. You were emotional. Margaret's voice rose slightly. You were threatening me. Ethan stepped between them. Enough. The room went silent again. Ethan felt something shift inside him completely this time. Not confusion anymore. Clarity forming through the noise. I'm going to do something, he said slowly. And both of you are going to accept it. Vanessa frowned. What are you talking about? Ethan looked at her steadily. Space. Vanessa blinked. Excuse me? I need distance, he said firmly. From everything. Margaret's expression softened slightly. Vanessa's didn't. So you're choosing her, Vanessa said quietly. Ethan closed his eyes for a moment, then opened them. I'm choosing the truth. That was the first time Vanessa didn't have a response, and for the first time since she met Ethan Calloway, she realized she might be losing control. If you're still watching, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to Storynova, because in the next part, Ethan finally makes a decision that forces Vanessa into a corner she never expected. And what she does next changes everything. Ethan didn't go back to Vanessa that night. Instead, he stayed in a small consultation room down the hall, staring at the same 3 documents Marcus had sent him over and over again. Debt records, business failures, suspicious partnerships that always ended the same way. Vanessa entering quickly, leaving quietly, and leaving behind chaos no one could fully explain. But what bothered Ethan more than the pattern was how easily he had missed it. His phone buzzed again. Vanessa calling. He didn't answer. It rang again. Still, he ignored it. A message came instead. We need to talk. You're being influenced. Ethan stared at the screen for a long moment before locking it. Then another message arrived seconds later. Please don't let her turn you against me. He exhaled slowly. That word again. Turn. Like someone was manipulating reality. Or trying to. Meanwhile, in Margaret's room, Vanessa stood near the window, arms crossed, watching the city lights outside. Margaret observed her silently. You know he's going to find out everything, Margaret said quietly. Vanessa did in turn. Find out what exactly? Margaret's voice stayed calm, but firm. That you're not who you said you are. Vanessa finally turned around. And who did I say I am? Margaret didn't hesitate. Someone who loves my son. A small smile appeared on Vanessa's face. I do love him. Margaret shook her head slightly. No. Vanessa's expression tightened. You don't get to decide that. Margaret leaned forward slightly. Love doesn't feel like control. The air changed immediately. Vanessa's smile faded completely. Control? She repeated. Margaret didn't move. You're isolating him from people who care about him. Vanessa stepped closer. I am not isolating him. You're competing for him. That hit harder. Vanessa's voice dropped. He chose me? Margaret replied instantly. He hasn't chosen anything yet. Silence stretched between them. Then Vanessa whispered, almost coldly, He will. Down the hall, Ethan finally stood up. He had made a decision. Not emotional, not reactive, something clearer. He walked straight to security and requested access logs. At first, they hesitated. Sir, that's private patient information. Ethan leaned in. It's my mother's room. A pause, then approval. He reviewed the logs carefully, times, entries, names, and there it was. Vanessa Reed, multiple entries when he wasn't present. Always short, always timed around moments he wasn't there. Why so many visits? He asked quietly. The nurse looked unsure. She said she was family. Ethan froze slightly. She's not. The nurse frowned. She showed proper authorization. Ethan felt something tighten in his chest. Authorization. That meant paperwork. That meant access. That meant planning. He left the desk immediately. Back upstairs, Margaret was suddenly sitting upright, breathing faster. Vanessa noticed instantly. "What's wrong?" she asked. Margaret shook her head. Nothing. But her eyes were fixed on the door. Something felt wrong again. Vanessa stepped closer. "You're scared." Margaret looked at her directly. "Yes." Vanessa tilted her head. "Of me?" Margaret didn't answer. That silence was enough. Vanessa exhaled slowly. "You really think I'd hurt you?" Margaret's voice was steady. "I think you already tried to change everything around my son." Vanessa smiled faintly. "You're overreacting." Margaret shook her head. "No, I'm finally seeing clearly." Vanessa's eyes narrowed slightly. "Seeing what?" Before Margaret could answer, the door opened. Ethan walked in. The room immediately shifted. Vanessa turned toward him quickly. "Hey, listen, I've been trying to call you." Ethan didn't respond. He walked straight past her and placed the access logs on the bedside table. Margaret looked confused. "What is that?" Ethan didn't take his eyes off Vanessa. "Hospital records." Vanessa's expression tightened instantly. "Why do you have those?" Ethan's voice was low, controlled. "Why are your visits logged when I wasn't here?" Silence. Margaret slowly looked between them. Vanessa forced a small laugh. "Because I care about your mother. That's what people do." Ethan stepped closer. "You used authorization forms I never signed." Vanessa's smile vanished. "That's not true." "Then explain it." The room went completely still. Vanessa stared at him for a long moment. Then she exhaled. "Fine." Margaret stiffened. Ethan didn't move. Vanessa's voice dropped slightly. "I didn't tell you everything." Margaret's heart started racing. Ethan stayed quiet. Vanessa continued. "I had access because I was helping coordinate care, that's it." Ethan frowned. "With who?" Vanessa hesitated, just long enough. "A consultant." Margaret shook her head slowly. "That's not true." Vanessa snapped slightly. "You don't know what you're talking about." Ethan raised a hand. "Stop." Both women went silent again. Ethan felt the pressure building in his chest. "I don't care about explanations anymore," he said quietly. "I care about truth." He turned to Vanessa. "Did you manipulate access to this hospital?" Vanessa opened her mouth, then stopped. That pause lasted 1 second too long. Margaret saw it, Ethan saw it, and in that moment, everything broke open. Vanessa exhaled slowly. "I did what I had to do." Silence. Ethan blinked once. "What?" Vanessa's voice hardened. "You don't understand how fragile everything is right now." Margaret whispered. "Fragile for who?" Vanessa turned sharply. "For him." Ethan frowned deeply. "For me?" Vanessa stepped forward. "You think I'm the problem here?" Ethan didn't answer immediately. That hesitation was enough. Vanessa's eyes filled with something darker now. Not sadness, not fear. Something sharper. "You're making a mistake," she said quietly. Ethan shook his head slowly. "I think I already made it." Vanessa stared at him. For a moment she didn't speak. Then she smiled again, but it wasn't warm anymore. It was final. "Okay," she said softly. "Then you'll see what happens when you choose wrong." Margaret's breathing quickened instantly. Ethan stepped forward. What does that mean? Vanessa looked at him for a long moment, then she simply said, You'll find out. And before either of them could respond, she walked out of the room. Ethan stood frozen, something cold spreading through his chest. Margaret whispered, Ethan. He didn't look away from the door. I think we're past warnings now. And for the first time, he realized this wasn't just about trust anymore. It was about danger. If you're still watching, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to Storynova. Because in the next part, Vanessa stops pretending completely. And what she does outside that hospital room forces Ethan to make a decision he can never undo. Ethan didn't move for several seconds after Vanessa left. The silence she left behind felt heavier than her presence ever did. Margaret broke it first, her voice trembling slightly. Ethan, she's not just upset. He finally looked at her. I know. That answer alone carried too much weight, because for the first time, Ethan wasn't defending Vanessa. He was trying to understand her, or what she had become. Down the hallway, Vanessa walked slowly, her expression unreadable. No tears now, no anger, just focus. She pulled out her phone and made one call. It's not working, she said quietly. A pause, then she added, He's pulling away. Another pause. Her expression tightened. Yes, I told her. Then she ended the call. Back in Margaret's room, Ethan sat down heavily beside the bed. I need to fix this, he said quietly. Margaret shook her head slightly. You can't fix someone who's hiding from you. Ethan exhaled. I didn't see it. Margaret's voice softened. Love makes people blind sometimes. Ethan looked down. Or stupid. No, she said firmly. Human. That landed differently. Ethan stayed quiet for a moment, then finally said, I'm going to end it. Margaret studied him carefully. Are you sure? He nodded. Before it gets worse. As if on cue, his phone rang. Vanessa. He stared at it, then answered. We need to talk, Vanessa said immediately. Ethan's voice was calm. We already did. No, she replied sharply. We didn't. A pause, then softer. Meet me, just once. Please. Ethan closed his eyes briefly. Margaret watched him, silent. Where? He asked. The place we first met, Vanessa said, just 10 minutes. Ethan didn't respond immediately. Then, one time. He hung up. Margaret grabbed his wrist weakly. Ethan. I need closure, he said. Don't go alone, she whispered. He hesitated, then nodded. Security will be nearby. That wasn't enough to comfort her, but it was all he had. 2 hours later, Ethan stood outside the gala venue where it all began. The same lights, the same music faintly spilling out. But everything felt different now. Vanessa was already inside, standing alone near the bar. When she saw him, she smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. You came, she said. Ethan nodded. Say what you need to say. Vanessa studied him for a long moment. Then she spoke softly. You're going to choose her, aren't you? Ethan didn't hesitate this time. Yes. Silence. That answer changed everything. Vanessa exhaled slowly, almost like she had been expecting it. I tried, she said quietly. I really did. Ethan frowned. Tried what? Vanessa looked up at him. To build something real with you. Ethan's voice hardened slightly. Real doesn't involve manipulation. That word made her expression shift. You still think that's what this is? Ethan stared at her. What else am I supposed to think? Vanessa nodded slowly, like something inside her had finally settled. Then I guess you made your decision. Ethan stepped back slightly. This isn't a negotiation. Vanessa looked almost sad now. No, she agreed softly. It's not. She reached into her purse. Ethan tensed instantly. Vanessa, Don't. She paused, then pulled out something harmless, a folded letter. She placed it on the bar. Read it when you're ready, she said. Ethan didn't move. What is it? Vanessa smiled faintly. The truth. From my side. A long silence stretched between them. Then Ethan said quietly, This ends here. Vanessa nodded. It already has. She turned to leave, but before she walked away completely, she looked back one last time. You know the worst part? Ethan didn't answer. I never lied about how I felt about you. Then she walked out. Ethan stood there long after she was gone. Eventually he opened the letter. His expression changed as he read. Not shock, not anger, something heavier, something complicated, but whatever was written there, it didn't change what he already knew. Some relationships don't end with clarity. They end with consequences. Weeks later, Margaret was recovering slowly. Ethan visited every day. Work faded into the background. His life recalibrated around what mattered again. Vanessa was gone. No more visits, no more messages, just silence. And for the first time in a long time, Ethan wasn't waiting for the next disaster. He was rebuilding. One afternoon, Margaret looked at him as he adjusted her blanket. You're different now, she said softly. Ethan smiled faintly. I had to be. Margaret nodded. You finally listened. Ethan sat back. I should have listened sooner. Margaret reached for his hand. You did eventually. That's what matters. Ethan looked down, then out the window. I thought success was building something big, he said quietly. Turns out it was protecting something small. Margaret squeezed his hand. That's life. And for the first time since everything began, Ethan believed her. Not because everything made sense now, but because he finally understood what didn't matter anymore. Somewhere far away, Vanessa sat alone, unread letter still in her past. And the story of Ethan Calloway didn't end in victory or loss. It ended in understanding, painful, irreversible, and real. Ethan didn't open the letter immediately. He sat in his car outside the hospital parking lot with the engine off, the folded paper resting in his hands like it carried weight far beyond ink and paper. The night felt unusually still, almost wrong, as if the world itself was holding its breath. Finally, he unfolded it. Vanessa's handwriting was calm, precise, almost disturbingly controlled. Ethan, if you're reading this, then you've already decided what I am. He paused, jaw tightening, but continued. I know what Mark has found. I know what your mother believes. And I know what it looks like from the outside. But you never asked what I was running from. Ethan's grip tightened slightly as he kept reading. You think I met you by chance. I didn't. But not for the reason you think. His expression darkened. Before you, I was already being watched. A man named Holloway, your competitor in West Coast acquisitions, approached me months before we met. He offered me a deal. Get close to you. Learn your patterns, your vulnerabilities, your mother's influence over you. Ethan froze, shaking his head slightly as if refusing the words to settle. I refused at first, but refusal doesn't end pressure. It escalates it. The next lines came slower, heavier. My business didn't fail naturally. It was destroyed. My accounts frozen, my identity buried. I was left with two choices: disappear or survive in the only way they still allowed. Ethan's breathing deepened, so I played the role they built for me. I let them think I was using you. His eyes sharpened, because if they believed I was focused on you, they stopped looking at my real objective. His stomach tightened as he read further. Your mother wasn't a target, Ethan. She was leverage, not against you, against me. Ethan shook his head again, refusing it, But his eyes kept moving. The night in the hospital. What your mother saw wasn't what she thinks. I was removing a tracking device hidden in her medical file. If I had done it openly, she would have been moved immediately. And then she would have actually been in danger. His pulse quickened. When I said you will choose, I wasn't talking about love. I was talking about survival. The final lines felt different, heavier than everything before them. Ethan, I never asked you to trust me. I asked you to watch who benefited when you stopped, and if you still think I was your enemy. Check your mother's hospital records from the night I left. He sat completely still as silence swallowed the car. Then his phone rang. Unknown number. He answered. Marcus's voice came through, tense and urgent. Ethan, don't go back inside the hospital. Ethan frowned sharply. Why? A pause. Then Marcus said, because your mother was moved an hour ago, and nobody in the system authorized it. Ethan slowly turned his head toward the hospital building, his breath catching as reality began to fracture in a way he could no longer ignore. And in that moment, he realized Vanessa's final message might not have been manipulation at all. It might have been a warning he was already too late to understand. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, comment your thoughts, and subscribe to Storynova for more dark, emotional twists like this one.